Good evening, everybody. It's Virginia Amos, and welcome back to our show here on the ZTV channel, where we just have a wonderful opportunity to talk to the people who make Alexandria such a great place to live and work. But before we do anything, and before we go any further, if you're out there and you're listening to us, please let us know. Join in the conversation. And if you haven't subscribed already, you want to hit the big subscribe button so that you never miss an episode of ZTV. So tonight, we are going to be talking to two board members with Agenda Alexandria about the upcoming program on Monday. And one of the things that Agenda Alexandria always tries to do is present topics that are front and center in Alexandria. And what better topic than surviving and thriving? How businesses are surviving the pandemic. So to tell us a little bit more about the program, some of the people that are going to be on, and what the impetus was behind this particular group, we have Rod Kuckro, known to almost everybody in Delray. Longtime activist and journalist. And so we welcome Rod to the show. He's in his living room right down the street. Hi, Rod. And our other guest tonight is former councilman and another, lifetime resident of Alexandria, none other than living legend Frank Fannon. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Virginia. Thanks for having us on tonight. We look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Absolutely. You know, it's so appropriate. I was listening to NPR this afternoon, and on the Daily Show, they were talking about the statistics around employment during this pandemic. And the statistics were really frightening, and they were comparing them to the Great Recession of 2007, and how even at the worst point of that terrible recession, we are much worse off. And I think it speaks to exactly why this topic is so pertinent for the discussion on Monday.
Right. So Virginia, do your listeners, watchers need some background on Agenda Alexandria?
Give us a little bit. It always helps. Not a bad thing at all.
Well, Frank's better equipped to do that because Frank was chairman just 3 years ago.
Sure. Agenda Alexandria has been around our community for close to 23 years now, and I've been on the board for about the last 7 years or so. So we have dinner meetings traditionally, and obviously with the pandemic going on, our dinner meetings have been on hold, and we would meet once a month pretty much from September through May, and we would have a hot topic that's going on in the city, anything from schools to policing to whatever the issue might be, development in the community, and we have lots of different topics. We've had over 200 topics through all the years that we've done the Agenda Alexandria program, and we have a great new board this year. Virginia's new on the board this year, and we're very excited to have her along with us. And the topics have just been fabulous, and we have to mold and move with all the issues that are going on out there right now. And so this meeting that we have coming up on Monday, which Rod will be the main host of the program, it's going to be great. We have 4 wonderful community leaders, Joe Collum from Burke and Herbert Bank, Stephanie Landrum from the Economic Development group, and Mango Mike, who's everybody knows him and has dined at his restaurants all throughout Alexandria. And then we also have the president of the Old Town Boutique District. So it's going to be great.
That's Megan Podolsky. Yeah.
Yes, Megan. So it's going to be great hearing from all these folks, and there's going to be a lot to cover and a lot of great questions to ask.
Well, you've got a great variety of people. I'm glad to hear that.
Let me expand a little bit, if I can, Virginia, on what Frank was talking about. So since the pandemic, because we'd always been having these in-person meetings, you've been to them, where people have an option to come beforehand and have dinner. we couldn't do that any longer. And through the beauty of technology, like we're using right now, all of our programs have been virtual. But every program since the pandemic, I think we started in April, have been related somehow to an aspect of the pandemic and how it affects the city, whether it's in education or mental health or law enforcement. And so that's why this month we're looking at, now that there's some months of experience and data, how is the business community writ large affected by this? And to a lesser extent, how does it affect commercial property? How does it affect city revenue? And what's the city going to do in response to a loss of revenue that may actually impede the ability of businesses to recover as quickly? So that'll be among the topics we're going to talk about with these four panelists on Monday afternoon.
I doubt you had any trouble putting this panel together.
Well, we went out and we made some calls, and I feel really good about this group that we have out there, because they're some of the best in all their different lines of business. If you think about Joe Collum, he's worked at Burke and Herbert Bank for years, and obviously we all know Burke and Herbert Bank is almost as old as the city of Alexandria itself. And I'm in the banking business on a different end, in the mortgage banking. But I remember when the pandemic first broke out and the word of the PPPs came out for these loans, it was just absolutely amazing how many people applied for them, how our underwriters for the programs were overwhelmed. And it was so unique, because it's like a program that came out and nobody knew what the guidelines were. And then the money was released one day, so people are underwriting loans as they're learning the guidelines. So it was a huge challenge for a lot of the bankers that dealt with these PPP loans. And I know the folks at my bank, they were working 15 hours a day until the money ran out. So a lot of these businesses that were organized and on top of it and ready to get the applications in right when the money became available, I know a lot of folks that were able to get this money. But when you write lending guidelines or loan guidelines in a rush, believe me, people miss a lot of different things, and there's a lot of businesses that didn't qualify, a lot of businesses that really didn't need the money that got the money. And Joe will be able to get a little deeper into that on Monday's program, because he was the fellow that was on the front line underwriting these loans.
Yeah, here's what Joe's going to talk about. Burke and Herbert, of course, operates mostly in Alexandria, but they've branched out in the parts of Arlington and Fairfax. But they handled more than 1,150 loans in the first round of the PPP program. And he said, the first round was a mess. It was like drinking from a fire hose. We didn't know exactly what the guidelines meant, and neither did the people applying. But we wanted to get the money processed so they could continue operating their businesses. And if your viewers don't know what these were loans that was part of the first act passed by Congress in relief of the coronavirus pandemic. And these were loans that were, I forget what the outside limit was, but I think he told me that the average was $119,000. And these can be used to pay your rent if you're a restaurant, or if let's say you're a salon, you could pay your employees their salaries and their health care. This is meant to keep people in business, to keep money in your pockets instead of a paycheck that you might otherwise get. But the beauty of these loans, they're so-called loans, but actually they are forgivable. And at the end of the term, if the businesses can prove to the government and to the bank, like Burke and Herbert, that they actually used it to pay rent or pay employee salaries, they can get that loan forgiven. Now, the interesting thing that Joe told me is that most people he handled have not yet filed paperwork to have their loans forgiven. They still seem to want to pay them back. Just out of their obligation they always seem to have when they borrow money, right?
Right.
Um,
And
he's trying to tell them, you really can, if you met the guidelines, you should actually apply to get the loan forgiven, because that will happen. He is hoping that there might be a round three once the election's sorted out, maybe a new Congress, that there'll be another round to keep people, businesses and their employees whole during the first quarter of 2021. So he'll have a lot to explain about that. And as Frank said, he's very well known in the community. In fact, he actually handled a loan for Mike Anderson, who was one of our panelists. And Mike said, if it hadn't been for Joe Cullum, that maybe Mike's restaurant group would not be doing as well as they are today.
Well, I think there are two things here. And Frank, not to take away from large banks at all, but my my daughter-in-law in Charleston, South Carolina, is a VP with a local bank, and this was one instance where local banks really rose to. I mean, they do rise to the occasion, but they really had an opportunity to step in. They knew their customers intimately. Most of them had long histories. And in some cases, the regional banks were actually able to facilitate things sometimes faster
Yes.
than the larger banks. And I think that also speaks to how individual communities are working. And one thing that I think Agenda Alexandria proves it. But one thing that I've always appreciated about Alexandria is that it is a small town in so many ways. And the business communities and the civic associations come together to support each other.
Right.
And
and piggyback on those comments there, but I've been in banking for years. I do mortgage banking, residential loans, but I've always told people you should definitely have more than one bank, because everybody needs banks. You need them for different aspects of your life. And just when we talk about the mortgage business, we lend a lot of money to the Fannie Mae guidelines when people buy houses, but only 20% of adult Americans can really qualify for the Fannie Mae guidelines, because we have situations where they might have a great net worth, but they don't show income on their tax returns. And even if you have a multi-million-dollar net worth, but you don't have an income stream on your tax returns, you can't get a Fannie Mae mortgage. So we've actually turned down people with huge net worths just because the way their tax returns don't show an income stream. And a lot of this changed back in 2008, 2009, when we had the big economic collapse, because there did need to be some change in some regulation in lending, because it was really an unregulated industry. And, a lot of taxi cab drivers got $600,000 mortgages with no money down to buy houses, and that didn't turn out too well. So nobody who's not qualified is going to be able to borrow any money right now.
Good point about having more than one source of financial information and financial resource. I mean, that's a great point. And Rod, you made a good point about the loans. They have helped people, and I hope that word gets out there that they don't have to be repaid. That if people have really done their due diligence, that is something that they can just feel comfortable with about not repaying.
Well, as Joe told me, the recipient should know that if they'd read the application and what the guidelines were. And plus, that was maybe one of the chief reasons to apply for one of these, is that if you fulfill the terms, it was a grant. It wasn't a loan. But Joe just thinks there's a lot of people who are used to dealing with credit or obligations and thinking, well, I owe the money. And the first inclination is not essentially to ask to have it forgiven, which in some ways is a very high praise to the businesses that have taken the money so far from the federal government. But he said he's trying to tell them I'll be smart before the end of the year to ask for it to be forgiven, so you can get onto the next round.
Well, I'm looking forward to to listening to Mike Anderson. I did a program earlier this summer with his daughter Chelsea, and bless her heart, she has actually kept a playbook. Starting with the very beginning of the pandemic, about what they did, and I thought it was fascinating, because, as I said, in culinary school they don't teach you pandemic. Now, 2 years from now, they're going to be teaching something, I guarantee you. But I thought that was just. I said you should, put this in textbook form and sell it, because it really is. I mean, we're going to look back on this a couple years from now, and people are going to go, "Wow, I didn't think I could do that. I didn't know I could do that." People have had to turn so much and to look at things so differently. And again, I think that's what will be so good about hearing from this group of people on Monday, because some really innovative things have come out of this time that we've suffered.
Right. Well, that's something Mike Anderson will talk about, Virginia. I spoke to him yesterday, and of course he has restaurants across the city,
Right.
but in different neighborhoods. And I said, well, will you be willing to talk about the fact of, depending how long your restaurant's been there, how loyal and how supportive the local community is? I mean, a restaurant in Delray that's been there for, say, 15 years may have a different level of support from the local neighbors who want to buy a meal once or twice a week, as opposed to hit the Carlisle restaurants that are newer and that are more high end in some ways. So he said that's definitely the case. And he hopes that because it's a chain of restaurants, not a chain, but a group, that it comes out in the wash. But yesterday he was scrambling to get together Christmas decorations for all the restaurants. I think he has, 7 or 8 now?
Something like that.
Yeah.
So because he thought that was more and more important this year to have decorations that would make customers want to feel welcome during the holidays.
Rod, when you're interviewing, I think a lot of the viewers and myself included, I'd be really interested to get his opinion about how he thinks the whole restaurant industry is going to survive this. Not just his businesses, but I'm hearing 50% of these restaurants won't be open next year. My office is down on King Street. I walk up and down there, and I just feel horrible, just chairs in the window in front of these restaurants were closed. And it's absolutely devastating. If you think about this pandemic, the way it has hit different businesses, if you're in the travel industry, the restaurant industry, the entertainment industry, it got shut off in a spigot. And then other businesses, like the grocery store business, is just busier than ever. People are in the grocery stores all the time. We're doing mortgage loans. Mortgage rates are 3%. You can borrow $100,000 for $420 a month on a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So it's just, it's affecting every industry differently. And I just feel horrible for the folks that are, in those high impact industries that really took the brunt of this.
Well, Frank, Mike is going to talk about that. And on the phone, we talked anecdotally about what's going on in the city based on things we know now. You may have heard the Al Steakhouse on Mount Vernon Avenue, a fixture in Delray since the late 50s.
Right.
It's on the market. But the biggest news is Clyde's Mark Center. I mean, probably the newest of the Clyde's restaurants, which of course has how many rooms? 10, 12 rooms and bars. That is now on the market. It may go out of business. Clyde's doesn't want to do it anymore.
Wow.
Well, think about that. That was a great place to go after work.
Oh,
for
yeah.
a drink or to take your family on grandma's birthday. But those things aren't happening anymore for that restaurant. And so it's very possible the city will lose that one as an institution. I do think, based on my own experience, and maybe both of you could talk about this. We have a half dozen places, my wife Melissa and I, that we love to support. And I'm not going to name them to disadvantage anybody else, but we go there at least once a week. We buy a dinner, leave a big tip when we pick it up. And I think a lot of people are doing that at the restaurants that they really like, whether it's in Delray or parts of Old Town, maybe North Old Town as well now. And what's interesting too here, Frank, is that there are actually new restaurants opening during the pandemic in the city.
That's true. As a matter of fact, there's a restaurant that opened just last year here in Delray on Mount Vernon Avenue. Had barely gotten its feet off the ground before the pandemic hit, and they just announced the other day that they're opening a second location in Clarendon. So something went right for them.
Right. And the one of the things you talked about earlier in the program here, Virginia, is the impact this is having on everybody's budget, but the whole city's budget and the city economy. And Stephanie Landrum is one of the best people in all of Greater Washington to talk about this. So she's going to be a great panelist to be able to talk about that. So city government is losing a tremendous amount of money with the commercial tax assessments are going to go down. Do you remember even the last city council race? They had a big fight about a penny tax on on the restaurants, and that arguably cost one city councilman his seat. But what a minor issue that is now in the world we're dealing with now for the restaurants. And the homeowners are really the main taxpayers here in the city. And one of the things, if we lose these commercial revenues, unless the city really reduces some spending, it's all going to fall back on the homeowners. And one of the things about the way the legislature's set up in Virginia is there is no maximum tax rate a local municipality can set. So traditionally, Alexandria home property tax has been about 1% of the home value. Today, I think the tax rate is 1.13%. But, keep in mind there is no maximum tax rate, and unless things turn around on the commercial end or the city controls their spending, those numbers could keep going up. And as you know, some homes in Connecticut, New Jersey, they pay 2.5% of their home value in annual taxes. So that's a big concern that all property owners need to have on their radar as we get into these budget discussions coming up, not only this year, but this is going to affect 2 and 3 years down the road.
Well, Frank, you raised a good point. I talked to Stephanie about this earlier in the week. Of course, the city has lost so much revenue that they normally would have garnered through tourism. People coming to take tours of the historic properties, or to come for business, or just to come over for a meal. And of course, we have some small convention spaces that host the people, and those aren't operative right now. So the city manager's proposed budget already has a fairly sizable tax increase and fee increases on homeowners and businesses. And I asked Stephanie to sort of talk about how realistic that would be, and whether or not there's actually could be a further drag on the recovery of business, and also if it would be a drag on the ability for homeowners to take the money they otherwise might have spent at a restaurant and instead have to give it to the city. So there's a real discussion that will be had politically, and I think that she may not be so willing to talk about it as perhaps some people who might listen to the program and be willing to pose questions.
Right. Yeah, well, that's, the budget season kind of gets underway in February, and then they adopt the city budget in May. So that's kind of, we're getting close to having the annual budget season discussion. So it's not going to be pretty. And Stephanie should be able to give some great insight into that.
It should be. And I hope, I've said all along that there is no going back to normal. I mean, we are there's only going forward. Normal is what you have on a daily basis. So there is no going back. We've got to look to the future. Businesses are reinventing themselves. That's not going to change. So I think there's opportunity here if we are willing to look at it that way, instead of just the doom and gloom.
Right.
Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about the historic boutique district, because they have made huge inroads in the past couple of years in really calling attention to the small boutiques in Old Town. And I know this has to have been hard on them, but they are a great unified group.
Well, the boutique district is interesting because it's not just small boutiques. It's also things like upscale hair salons, day spas, and some restaurants. They have a fairly broad membership, and then they're different in some degree from the Old Town Business Association. But as you say, Virginia, a lot of them are very small specialty places that you can't find anywhere else in the metropolitan area. It's what makes Alexandria unique in so many ways, is the one-of-a-kind businesses that are here as opposed to chain stores. I can think of a silversmith I know in Old Town. The woman who is Megan, who's the president, has a wonderful sort of children's consignment store called 529, and very popular, and they're doing really well, she says. In some ways, the pandemic is giving people the freedom to take money they weren't using, for example, to go out to dinner, and to go to a boutique instead. I mean,
and Rod, that's a good point. I mean, people love to walk around Old Town. People love to get out of their house during the pandemic. They don't want to be in big crowds. You don't want to probably go park your car in Tyson's Corner these days. So actually, this pandemic could, I see what you're saying here, could be helping some of these local businesses on these small stores in Old Town where they're only going to have 3 or 5 or 10 people in them at a time, spreading out. And it's going to be interesting to see, what her comments are about this. But from what your comments there, I can understand how this might be a little good for the small boutique businesses here in town.
Especially, what she told me, just to interject, what she told me was, it used to be a lot of her customers on a Saturday were running in and out to get a gift for somebody or to buy something for let's say a baby shower. But now people aren't under pressure about time so much, and they can come there whenever they want and spend as much time as they want, and they're more inclined to actually make a purchase.
Oh, that's great. Frank, we have a question from one of our viewers. She said, "Are you thinking about running for the open council seat?"
I'm not planning on that. I'm not planning on that right now. But there's 6 open council seats.
That's right. I just say
There's 6 open council seats, and there's
and a mayor's seat too.
And a mayor's seat and 9 school board seats. So I think I always tell people, if you think you can do a good job, if you're engaged in the community, you're probably qualified enough to be on the city council or the school board. So yeah. So feel free, if you want to make a change, go ahead and run. And that's what motivated me 10 years ago to do it. So
well, let me answer that viewer who posed that question to Frank. Former Councilman David Speck always responded to that kind of question by saying, "I'll be happy to run. Write me a check right now for $1,000." So a lot of people will encourage their fellow citizens to run for city council, but until you put your money into that race, it really should be taken seriously by the person being questioned.
Yeah.
Well, we just like to answer, if viewers ask questions, we,
Sure.
like to put them out there. Well, I think this is going to be a really exciting panel on Monday. I've gotten I read the Washington Business Journal now just to keep up with everything that's going on. And talking about revenues, the old power plant is up for development now. And I think, again, it's just an opportunity. It's going to be years down the road, but I hope Stephanie can perhaps speak to that a little bit, because that's another one of those enormous projects that has so many tentacles that are going to go out into the community, other than just the buildings themselves.
And Virginia, about 3 years ago, that was one of our programs on Agenda Alexandria. We did a whole program on the Myron plan and the future of the power plant and the site. So I think in the next maybe 24 months or so, we should maybe do another program on that.
Absolutely, I think that sounds like a great idea, because that's a huge thing.
Yeah, next to the landmark property, it's the next biggest site in the city that's available for development. And that will be the end of any large development, because after Landmark and the Moran site, you run out of large pieces of land. So
and that may be okay too.
Yeah.
We live in such a unique area, and I mean the whole world always seems to flood to Greater Washington, and with this Virginia Tech development and the Amazon, I mean Alexandria, it's constantly changing. It's going to keep changing, but I think it's going to remain a wealthy place, and you're going to need high incomes for housing, and there's a lot of good things, but also a lot of challenges that come with this. So things are always evolving, and that's why Agenda Alexandria is here to fill in everybody in the community about it.
Well, they do a great job, and as long as we have you two staying on top of things, I have no problem with what's going to be coming down the turnpike. So tell us when to tune in on Monday and where.
Rod? Did we lose Rod?
No, it's at noon. It's at 12 noon. 12 noon.
Okay,
Noon.
12 noon. Okay.
It's at 12 noon. And you can access it through the Agenda Alexandria website, but also if you had linked into the ZTV, there's a registration button on ZTV.
Perfect.
It will also be broadcast on Facebook Live, and
it'll be it'll be on YouTube, so you can go back and watch it too.
Yes, so it's going to be broadcast live at noon, and then rebroadcast. I think it's 6:30 or 7 o'clock on Monday, but then also available in perpetuity after that.
Terrific. I must say that's one of the things that I think is such an advantage over the in-person meetings, is that opportunity to see it again and again.
And Virginia, we've had a lot more people view the meetings since we've gone online than we've had the dinner meetings, for sure.
I know you have. See, it's an opportunity. It's just an opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
But you miss the social interaction. I mean, there's a large loss there.
Well,
value.
Yes, everyone's missing that. Okay, guys, we're going to wrap up here. It's 7:30. I thank you so much for having come on with us tonight. Even if it was a little technological challenge, we got through it, and we will see you on Monday at 12 o'clock.
Yes.
And-
Great.
Okay.
Great program,
Okay.
Virginia.
And
Thanks,
in the me-
Virginia.
Good night. But in the meantime, remember to be the good news in someone's life.
Thanks, Frank. Good night.
Good night, guys.